Welcome back to Turning Hard Times to Good Times. I'm back here with Bob Moriarty to talk about Common Sense 2.0, a little pamphlet, a little booklet you can pick up at Amazon.com. And as Bob says, you don't have to agree with everything, but it certainly is thought-provoking. And it sure would be good if we could start talking about things that are uncomfortable. If we could do it and do it respectfully with each other, that's certainly what we try to do on this show as much as possible. Well, Bob, when we left, we were talking about the military-industrial complex. We talked quite a bit about that. There's a lot of other things that this book touches on, too, a lot of parts of our lives that are really disruptive and very, very problematic. Debt is the big issue, and I would argue, and I think you would agree, and I think this book would agree, that 1971, August 15th, was a very, very destructive date in terms of President Nixon's taking us off the gold standard, because that really freed us up. It allowed us to create money to finance Vietnam and subsequent wars, but not only that, to finance the socialist state as well. That's why Kamala Harris thinks there's no end. And you don't, as you say, nobody's talking about what any of this is going to cost. But you have some pretty strong feelings about some of these issues, and I'd like you to address them. Student debt is one you think could be fixed fairly easily. Well, it's over $1 trillion, Bob.
Well,
but of course, our Fed just created $1 trillion. Didn't they create $2 trillion just recently? The Fed did.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Here's the deal on student debt, and it's very important to understand. First of all, everybody who is going to be a responsible adult should understand that debt is slavery. When you go borrow money, you are spending your future. And whoever you owe the money to literally owns you. Now, what happened about 20 years ago was Congress decided that they were going to have these unlimited programs for loaning money to students in college. And that sounds wonderful. But they made the debt non-dischargeable, which means if you go out and borrow $50,000 or $100,000 to study underwater basket weaving, and then eventually discover you can't make a living at it and you go bankrupt, you still owe the money. And what that did is gave the banks, free profit, and it gave the colleges the incentive to raise tuition. So tuition has gone up 3 times the rate of inflation, and the banks are guaranteed to make money because the debt cannot be discharged. The solution to that is so simple, it's crazy, and that is make the debt dischargeable. If the banks are going to loan money and make a profit, they should take risk. They're not going to loan somebody $100,000 to study underwater basket weaving. And what we're doing is taking our best and brightest kids and we're putting chains on them. I mean, BLM is pissing and moaning about slavery. The last slave was imported into the United States in 1816, Slavery was ended in the United States in theory in 1864, even though it's changed a lot since then. But people are going into slavery today just like they are in Tripoli, Libya. If you were in debt, $30 or $50 or $100,000 as a graduate, you're a slave. We're doing this to the best and brightest kids we've got. So instead of them starting off life with no particular debt, they're starting off with an average $32,000 apiece in debt. To pay off $32,000, you got to earn about $50,000. There are people in their 60s and 70s who are still paying off student debt.
Yeah, it's quite a racket, and it's a good example of when government gets involved with the banking institution to. I seem to remember Hillary Clinton supporting that legislation that you were talking about, but it's a good example of government getting involved with the banks, and probably the banks that help these guys get reelected, and the people aren't aware of it. So
you think?
Yeah.
You think they just bribe Congress? Of course they bribe Congress.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what seems to be going on. There have been people complaining about it, but nothing seems to get done about that. The book also talks about derivatives as a giant casino. I mean, this is really something that people have no idea about, how this could really trigger things to the downside, right?
Unfortunately, derivatives are one of those things that very few people understand. But at the very least, you should understand that the $600 or so trillion in derivatives is a giant casino. And one of the things that happens in casinos is sometimes they go broke. We have so many elements of our financial system that are in chaos right now. I'm just flat going to tell you, and you can come back in a year or two and remind me, it's going to be far worse than anybody imagines. You cannot shut down the international economy for 3 or 4 months without destroying that economy. We have 53 million Americans apply for unemployment. Many of those Americans are never going to get their jobs back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that leads to what? What's the government going to do? They're voters, right? So they're going to be voting, and they're going to be looking for... I think they have another $1.6 trillion bill or something that's between the Congress and the president right now. Nancy Pelosi and the Treasury Secretary are working on it.
They're voting right now. They're voting in Portland. They're voting in Seattle. They're voting in 400 cities in the United States. They're rioting. It's going to get worse. And there's a simple solution that would cure the mistake that Nixon made in 1971.
Yeah, it would be, but it's not going to happen, in my view, Bob, until the system breaks down, and then maybe there's a hope.
It's broken down. It's not.
Well, I realize that, but I realize that, Bob, but most people don't realize that yet. I think most people still are believing in the tooth fairy. I mean, if you...
Yes. Yeah.
So I agree with you that it's broken down, and I think we're starting to see the movement in the precious metals prices, but it's only because a relatively few number of people yet understand that and believe it and are voting on it with their pocketbooks, that we haven't seen an exponential rise in the price of the metals, which I think is coming. And Alistair McLeod, who's going to be our guest next week, has written a paper, a short one that people can actually read at J. Taylor Media. Inflation this time is different. Alistair is agreeing with you, I believe, in suggesting that the amount of money that's going to have to be printed to try to placate, to try to pacify the masses that are really angry and in trouble in many ways, is going to just debase the currency to the point where it becomes worthless, I'm afraid. Do you agree with that?
100%. And interestingly enough, and bear in mind we're in July, he says it's going to happen by the end of this year. And I wouldn't go out and predict that, but I certainly won't disagree with that. We're seeing things today that are really quite remarkable. Silver going up $1.36. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yes, it's an amazing run, and I think 6-7% today in one day is quite something. Also, the medical system, Bob. You have some ideas about that, and the book talks about that as well. We have a medical system that nobody knows what they're paying for. Nobody really understands, if you have surgery, how much it's actually costing. They seem to fool around with the numbers. I think it's something like the retail, like a Macy's might decide to put $120 price tag on a shirt and then charge you $59, and you think you're getting quite a deal when it should have been $19 or $9 or something like that. So, what are your thoughts about the medical system and how that might be put in better order?
Well, it is totally dysfunctional. It's all fraud. They have bribed Congress. Let me give you a perfect example. I'm 73. I'm your age. I have high blood pressure, and I take medication for it. Mm-hmm. I can go to Spain and buy my blood pressure medication over the counter for 1.25 euros a month. Okay, it cost me, call it $2 a month. The same pills in the United States are $105. Now, the numbers in the book are really terrifying. Medical problems are a factor in 69% of bankruptcies. Okay? People have gone into the emergency room with a bad hangover. They walked out of the emergency room a few hours later with a bill for $15,000, and they've lost their home because of it. And you just raised one of the issues, and it's so simple. You need to do two things. One, every pharmaceutical company in the United States should be required by U.S. law to provide their medicines in the United States for sale at the lowest price anywhere in the world. If you want to do business in the United States, that's fine. We hope you make a lot of money. You charge the lowest price in the entire world. You cannot charge the snake bite medicine is $15,000 in Arizona, and it's $500 across the border in Mexico. Mm-hmm. The medical system is bankrupting people. It's not a question of the quality of care. It's destroying their life. So, one, make all medicine the lowest price in the world. Two, all medical services are priced in advance. They're written down, and you know exactly what it costs to get an appendix out, to get whatever, okay? People go into the hospital, and they don't find out until they're checking out what it cost them. That's insane. And you need to enforce the antitrust laws. The antitrust laws between the hospitals and the doctors and the medical service people and the pharmaceutical companies, it's all illegal. It's collusion. And we have the most expensive medical system in the world, and I think we're 17th or 19th or something like that. Medical system in the United States is an utter disaster. You can be against socialized medicine. They have socialized medicine in England. They have socialized medicine in Canada. They have socialized medicine in France. But they don't bankrupt people by taking them to the hospital. Now, I'm not saying single payer is the solution, but we need a solution that's better than what we've got right now. The medical system in the United States is total fraud.
Right. So it seems to be the case. So while we're on the topic of medicine, which is a few minutes left here, what about the COVID-19 thing? I mean, we were in trouble financially before that was inflicted on us, before that was imposed. That is really, would you say that's accelerating this demise? That it was coming anyway, but that this is just really accelerated it by a year, 6 months, or whatever?
Everything we are being told about COVID-19, everything is a lie. The masks cannot possibly prevent the virus from coming to your face, period. Okay? The New England Journal of Medicine said that. CDC said that. The NIH said that. No question about it. The whole mask thing is nonsense. The numbers are inflated for both testing and for the number of deaths. And what we've done is we've thrown this massive hand grenade in our financial system, and nobody realizes how bad it is. They're going too soon. Do you know what the difference is between inflation and hyperinflation?
It's just timing, pretty much.
Nope.
I mean, it's just all of a sudden psychology.
Nope.
Go ahead.
Japan has inflation, okay? They've been inflating their currency since 1989.
Yeah.
They didn't have hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is when people lose faith in the currency. And
Right.
Alistair McLeod, I think, is absolutely correct. And it's a lot sooner than people realize. Gold mining stocks, silver mining stocks are going to explode higher. If you think today is an anomaly, I'm going to tell you it's not. There will be days when gold's up $40, $50, $100. I own one particular stock that came up with good results yesterday. The stock was up 102% one day. That is just a start. Worldwide, 0.5% of all financial investments are in resources. In 1929, it was 29%. In 1980, it was 8%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and 1980, you and I can both relate to that, Bob, and that was quite a time, no doubt about it. And we saw, I think, rising inflation, lots of inflation. It is a matter of psychology, and it's when that psychology turns. If you look at charts of hyperinflation, that usually you have some inflation, a mild amount of inflation for quite some time, and people aren't worried about it. Just like now, they're not worried about it, and then all of a sudden, when that psychology changes and people lose their faith in the currency, as you were saying, then all of a sudden people want to get rid of that currency and get things that are real because they realize that tomorrow that money is going to buy less. And when that happens, when that psychology goes on, I think, and you think we're very close to being there, right, Bob?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
All right. Well, we are basically out of time here, Bob. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on Common Sense 2.0. Always good to hear your views on these things, and certainly want to talk to you about some of those stocks that you and I both follow. And as I know, people should go to 321 Gold. Go to 321 Gold. Bob has a lot of very interesting and profitable ideas there. I mean, it's one of those places I go to, Bob. When I look at the gold price, I go to 321 Gold every morning and look at the articles, some of which you write. But you always have a lot of excellent information there and a lot of very interesting and promising companies, some of which are sponsors of this show. Thank you so much, Bob, for being with us, and we'll look to do it again sometime in the near future.